today. My name is David Albrecht, and I'm a Clean Cities Coordinator here at Metropolitan Energy Center. We're going to cover a lot of ground today. We'll talk a little bit about MEC and our Clean Cities programs, supporting cleaner alternative fuels and cleaner fleets. We'll present information on several upcoming funding opportunities available directly through MEC in the next few months. We'll also talk about approaches to designing grant applications that save time and work on your part while improving your odds of getting the funding that your company or organization needs. Finally, and most importantly, we'll be taking your questions once the formal presentation wraps up. While we are holding the oral Q&A for the last part of the program, you're welcome to enter your questions in the chat window at any time, and we'll get to them later in the webinar. Also, for your information, this presentation is being recorded today, so it will be available for review or for anyone who missed the program this morning. So, what's on the menu? Next slide, please. To start with, I'm going to briefly run through the agenda. I'll take a few minutes to discuss MEC, Kansas City Clean Cities, our missions, and a little background on our organization. I'll touch on some basics of clean fuel funding and upcoming funding opportunities. Jeff Windsor, who's our grant specialist, will take over. He'll run through the basic structure that's necessary for a grant application to be successful, making sure that you understand what specific items are necessary and where they fit. Next, please. Kelly Gilbert, our executive director, will then get a little more in depth. She'll be talking about the difference between a request for applications and a request for proposals and the best approaches for each of those. She'll also talk about where grant applications can go wrong. Back to Jeff again after that for a little more detail on your responsibilities as a program partner under the rules of a grant. And finally, Q&A. A lot of information here, but we hope to do our best to keep things from going too far into the weeds today. Next slide, please. So, who are we and why are we here? We're Metropolitan Energy Center. We've been around as an independent 501c3 organization for nearly 40 years. Our original emphasis was on energy efficiency in buildings. We continue to work in that area with an eye on our mission statement. Kansas City Clean Cities is a more recent addition to our organization, designated in 1998 by the U.S. Department of Energy. We're part of a national network of Clean Cities coalitions. Those coalitions work to, and I quote, advance the energy, economic, and environmental security of the United States by supporting local decisions to reduce petroleum use in transportation. And since 1993, Clean Cities programs have cut gasoline use by 10 billion gallons, helped place more than 1 million alternative fuel vehicles on the road, and expanded clean fuel access across America. Next slide, please. This is a very quick look at some of the grant partners we're currently working with, both in the public and private sectors. There are more, but we kind of ran out of space for logos. Next, please. So, why this topic and why today? We sent out a call for feedback in September, and what our stakeholders said was clear. They'd like earlier notification on new grants, along with training on how to apply, more information sessions on upcoming funding, and, when possible, longer time windows before submitting applications. And considering that local and regional partners are critical to our work, we are happy to respond. Next slide, please. So, briefly, where do we get funding to help you replace old vehicles or install clean fuel systems? DARA is one key source. Run by the EPA, DARA, Diesel Emissions Reduction Act grants, apply to diesel fleets, class 5 to 8 on-road, marine diesel, locomotives, off-road, and more. There are multiple tracks for DARA funding eligible to different applicants. The amount of financial support available through DARA varies a lot by technology, by fleet, and by fuel, from 25 to 100% of vehicle improvements or replacements. With very limited exceptions, DARA grants do not support infrastructure. The Department of Energy is another source. DOE programs provide support for alternative fuel vehicles and infrastructure for a variety of technologies. DOE recipients can receive up to 45% of the costs of alternative fuel infrastructure and 45% of the incremental cost of all fuel vehicles. Finally, both Missouri and Kansas offer funding through the VW settlement. Unlike the first two categories on this slide, you don't need MEC as a gatekeeper for this. Any public agency or private company can apply depending on the specific program. However, we're always happy to help if you have questions or need assistance with a VW application in either state. Next, please. Finally, I will touch on these very briefly. There are several funding opportunities through MEC coming up in the next few months. The first is tentatively scheduled to go live on January 5th, 2021. It's based on US DOE funding and is intended to expand alternative fuel fleets and alt fuel infrastructures at one or more locations in Kansas and or Missouri. The second is supported by DARA funding and is tentatively set to open in early February. We'll be leaning towards electric vehicles and technologies for this application, but are open to other eligible technologies and approaches. Finally, we're expecting the next DARA national grant to open in early 2021, though we do not yet have a date for EPA's request for application. We are also anticipating another DOE program in spring of 2021, though again with dates still TBD. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Jeff and let him walk you through the basics of what you need to know when preparing to apply for funding. Thank you. Jeff, you have the floor.
Thanks, David. I will now go over basic components of our funding proposals, including the program essentials, timeline, eligibility assessments, narrative, line item budget and budget justification, certifications, and other attachments that may be needed. As my role as a contract specialist, I ensure that the following items are included in every proposal or application we receive before they can be approved for funding. Under Program Essentials, the overview goes over what the federal agency and MEC want to achieve with the project, such as to support vendors in the deployment of alternative fuel vehicles and or stations for fleet-based deployments. The timeline gives important dates of the project, such as the start and project end dates. Each RFA, or request for application, and RFP include eligibility requirements. If your application or proposal doesn't meet the eligibility requirements, the proposal most likely will not get selected. So your proposal narrative should closely mirror the goals of the RFP. It should include a summary, a work plan, and also environmental outcomes and environmental justice impact. You want us to hire your team, but we need a more digestible summary of what we'll offer and why we'll benefit from working with you. Thus, the proposal narrative should show why MEC should select your firm. Next slide. Under the line item budget, I'll list all items that are eligible with the grant criteria. And with the budget justification, indicate how and why a proposed cost helps to meet the project aims. A budget that is adequately and appropriately justified is the best way to ensure a productive cost analysis by the sponsor. With certifications and other, we are looking for required and other documentation that supports your proposal, such as a vehicle emission certification and price quotes. After I go over the grant basics here, then Kelly Gilbert will walk through each of these components as it relates to a proposal or application. On writing a grant, one should determine grant compatibility. Before moving forward, ask the first key question: does the proposed funding fit your organizational needs? Then maintain focus on the strategic goals of the grant program. Then clearly state your plans, like specify action items to be completed by a date and its cost. Then maintain focus in each section: the abstract and narrative, technical information, budget, schedule, professional qualifications should reflect clear tasks, costs, and timetables. When preparing a grant, it is best to have a rough draft plan ready. Keep a list of vehicles targeted for action. Have a draft plan for infrastructure development, if applicable. Have a draft budget and spending plan and tentative timeline. prepare draft letters of commitment, prepare draft vehicles and equipment bids, and maintain a list of key organizational contacts. And something I like to emphasize is contact us. We are happy to talk to you about the plans before RFAs and RFPs are announced. And you can also follow us on our website and subscribe to our newsletter. Next slide. As hinted already, I would recommend that you build a proposal template you can use with every opportunity so that there's no need to start from scratch each time. With DOE and DERA projects, you should keep the following on the template for each new opportunity, such as basic info from similar past projects, a standard work plan structure, key personnel list, and air quality information for deployment sites. Again, communication is real important. A proposal should be the result of numerous discussions with MEC and your organization. There should be no surprises either in price or the strategy. It is important to have continual conversations with your MEC program coordinator so you're prepared when project opportunities arise also. Lastly, as an organization, the following are key things to remember when considering a grant and when it's awarded. First, have a data collection plan and make sure it's realistic. Get input from staff on capacity to administer grant during project planning. Make sure outcomes and data are realistic and can be delivered as planned. Next, costs need to be allowable, reasonable, and all acceptable. Document everything in a clear, organized way that plans for staff turnover. Then have a formal risk assessment process and conduct assessments early and often. And ensure continuous self-evaluation and improvement. So that concludes my portion. Kelly will now walk you through these components in RFAs and RFPs.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Jeff, and hello, everyone. Please let me know if you can't hear me, which I know is kind of a silly thing to say out loud. All right, so first things first, please note that while Metropolitan Energy Center does occasionally head competitive proposals on a national or mega regional scale, usually when you see a request for proposals or a request for applications from us, the project funds have already been secured and are dedicated to a constrained scope of work and geography. Typically, the geography is Kansas and Missouri, and occasionally areas of Nebraska or Iowa. So to receive opportunity announcements, all of us have hit on this, and so it must be important, right? You can email rfp@metroenergy.org to get put on our notification list. You can subscribe to our newsletter. If there's an open opportunity, you can view it from the upper right corner of our website homepage. There will be a link there. And generally, you can view our funding opportunities resource webpage. To find forms and templates specific to each opportunity, you'll want to navigate to the opportunity webpage, where you'll find links for the opportunity as well as related resources and information. So now that you've found an opportunity and you follow Jeff's recommendations to determine whether it's good for you and fits your schedule and budget, let's get to that spot. Each opportunity will have a web page and a governing document spelling out the particulars. The governing document is called the request for proposals or the request for applications. These resources are where you'll find critical information and instructions for a successful application. They'll include links and resources and questions and answers on the web page. And on the RFA or RFP, you'll find a cover page, table of contents, criteria for evaluation, administrative conditions, and other helpful sections in the governing document. Any open opportunity will have a web page devoted to providing information, details, links to documents and forms, questions and answers, background information, links to a project page, and other applicable and useful information. This page will be updated periodically with pre-proposal materials, questions and answers, and revised application materials and guidance when that becomes necessary. Could you successfully apply using only the information contained in the RFP document without ever visiting the proposal webpage? Probably, but I don't recommend ignoring this. Each RFA or RFP will start with a cover page, which gives critical dates and deadlines, as well as funding information. This information will also be prominently displayed on the opportunity webpage on our metroenergy.org site. The table of contents in the RFP will help you find information and instructions necessary for a successful proposal. Navigate to the program goals section within the document to determine whether your project is applicable to the funding opportunity. Then, using the criteria for evaluation and application submission sections, see what information you can or must include to be successful. In an RFP, these two sections should indicate what you'll write about and how you can organize your proposal to help Metropolitan Energy Center and the proposal reviewers understand how your project will help us meet our goals. The application submission section will include an application checklist with required document links, and for an RFP, will also include an optional template for a narrative and work plan. In an RFP, the table of contents will also feature a budget and cost sharing section that outlines cost sharing responsibilities among Metropolitan Energy Center, our funder, and the successful applicant. This is an example of an evaluation criteria form from a request for applications, and also the application checklist from a request for proposals, just so you see what they look like. Back on the opportunity webpage, scroll down to the Q&A section to find asked and answered questions from you and other prospective applicants. Often, prospective applicants will have questions to clarify the intent of a section of the RFP, or sometimes about project eligibility, etc. Please note that if you're asking these questions of an MEC team member after an opportunity is open for application, your response will be given publicly on the opportunity webpage so that other prospective applicants will have access to the same information. This means that occasionally the Q&A may contain useful information that is not accessible directly in the RFP. If a question highlights missing or incorrect information and triggers a substantive change, the RFP itself will be updated and the documents presented online will be replaced. Check back here before making a final application proposal. And by the way, those of you who have signed up to receive notifications would be notified when the documents are changed on the webpage. Depending on the project and responses Metropolitan Energy Center is seeking, we may release a request for applications or a request for proposals. A request for applications is used if we have a narrow target for applicants, such as with our search early this year for subawardees under our electrified terminal truck demonstration project. In an RFA, responses are easier and constrained. There's an application form, a budget form, which may sometimes actually be included in the application form, and certifications, which again may be simply your signature on the application form. RFAs may include limited narrative responses, and they may also require supplemental documents such as price quotes or specifications. We use a request for proposals if we have a broader opportunity for applicants with a wide range of potential responses, such as is often the case for our Department of Energy program. We currently have biodiesel fueling stations being built on I-70 at truck stops, DC fast charging being built at fueling stations on I-70 and I-35 spurs, electrification at urban municipal fleets, propane in suburban schools, and compressed natural gas in rural municipal fleets. For such a wide-ranging opportunity, an applicant's customized response must be more flexible and less constrained. So for these proposals, budget, certifications, and critical project information are still required, but each are now separate documents. And instead of an application form, there is now a technical narrative, which requires customized responsiveness to evaluation criteria, a detailed work plan and schedule, and adequate supporting documentation. To help you assemble these application components, we include in each RFP an application checklist and a sort of template for the narrative and work plan. The following slides show examples of applications and proposals. This is the application form we used early this year. Page 1 contains information about the applicant, summary budget information, a very small space for narrative project description, and the applicant agreement for signature by an authorized officer. Here we have page 2, which is about the trucks being deployed and the deployment area, as well as an opportunity to briefly pledge to continue to operate the new electric trucks and grow the electrification program as applicable. 3 very helpful instruction pages later, we have a simplified budget table, which instructs the user to show the cost-sharing split right in the table according to the program rules, which were explicitly stated in the request for application and in the application form. Add a letter of financial commitment and a quote from the manufacturer, and you're done. Very simple. Unfortunately, most of our opportunities come out as RFPs, and we're working on ways to design simpler application documents for broader opportunities. So perhaps the next time we do this training, we won't have the next section. Meanwhile, this is a table of contents from a recent successful proposal. How did they know how to include all that stuff and what order to put it in? We told them how. A little bit ago, I talked about how the parts of an RFP, guidance document. This proposer was responding to an opportunity that contained this instruction, again, the document checklist, and this instruction, somewhat of a template for the narrative components, and this one, and so on. So looking back at the RFP checklist and the table of contents from the sample proposal, you can see that this proposer used the RFP guidance document as an instruction manual to create their responses. Now, you might think that the amount of information requested is intimidating, but we don't intend for your response to be complex or lengthy. You could answer some criteria with 1 or 2 sentences, for instance, and that will be perfectly adequate for your situation. Now let's look at 2 items in detail before we hand things back over to Jeff. First up, your work plan. A detailed work plan can contain tasks, subtasks, SMART goals, a milestone schedule, a relational Gantt chart, and go, no-go points. This is what our work plan looks like when we propose a project to the Department of Energy or other major funder. This is an example section of a task and activity outline. And here's a milestone table with dates. Your mileage may vary, and in fact, it's often not necessary for a subawardee to provide such a detailed work plan, since your work is only part of what the project as a whole will be accomplishing. For example, this proposer estimated that a detailed work plan was not necessary to adequately explain their proposed task, schedule, and output. As it happened, they were right. So use your judgment to apply the right level of detail to your work plan. Next, budgets are your friends. My favorite. While we sometimes have a research or planning project going, it is not typical for us to seek new subawardees mid-project for such work. And so most of our RFPs will be for alternative fuel vehicle deployment or alternative fuel station installation. We'll focus our budget deep dive on these 2 activity types. Also, it's worth knowing that EPA-funded DARE projects and Department of Energy-funded alternative fuel projects have different budget forms required at the federal level. We collect data for each program using the federal project forms, so we'll look at both kinds of budget documents. First, let's look at an alt fuel station budgeting. If you need to do or buy something to make your station work, or to be safe for users, or to maintain the equipment in good working order, or to comply with local or state regulations, it's probably an eligible cost. Our budget form has several tabs that are used for different spending categories, and a detailed instruction page explains what to use each tab for and what information to include. Let's take a quick minute to view the instructions in the budget form. Generally speaking, each of these spending categories represents your direct purchases as a subawardee. Are you buying supplies direct from ACE or ACME? Put them in the supplies tab. If you have a delivery charge tacked onto that shipment of supplies or equipment, put it in the other tab. If you're contracting with a vendor to build stations, we don't need you to itemize the supplies or miscellaneous costs that are passed on to you by the vendor. That all goes into contractual, neat, and tidy, except equipment. All equipment deployed on site, including those whose costs are passed to you through a vendor contract, must be itemized in an equipment tab. And equipment, as you see in the inspection, is defined as being a value of over $5,000 per unit. This is because MEC is required to track all equipment purchases under some grant projects until each piece depreciates below a fair market value of $5,000. This is a requirement that often binds MEC to the project period. For a few additional years sometimes. Notice there are two equipment tabs. And I'm going to demonstrate that. Let's see here. Okay, notice there are two equipment tabs. One is just for vehicles and vehicle retrofits, and the other is just for station equipment. That's because vehicles often have specific certification and or cost sharing requirements that mean we have extra data to capture for vehicle projects. And I'll share more on that later. So for a station, if you know your stuff and you're doing a chunk of the work with your internal staff, you might very well use all of the spending categories for your project. On the other hand, if you've got enough on your plate and you plan to contract all of the work out, you might have costs only in contractual and equipment. Things can get complicated in there, but that's what the negotiation period is for and why we sometimes make contingent offers on our proposal. So if you have something in the wrong budget category that doesn't disqualify you, just use your best judgment, and if you have questions, again, use the Q&A tool. For vehicles, you'll provide line item details of proposed vehicles to be purchased or engine upfits to be installed for vehicle retrofit projects. You'll include make, model, year, engine and fuel type, total cost, number of vehicles to be procured. Basically, full details are to be provided in the budget form. If this happens to be a vehicle replacement project, individual unit data based on unit numbers or VIN numbers that are currently in your fleet are usually required for those vehicles that would be replaced under the project. This is true of all DARA projects and only a few types of Department of Energy or other projects. For vehicles being purchased or procured, it's acceptable to batch units that have the same engine model and make, model, year, and price. Speaking of vehicle budgeting, this is where most of the proposal errors seem to come into play. So first, you'll want to determine whether the base cost of an alternative fuel vehicle is allowable. Sometimes it is, which makes things nice and simple, but often it is not allowable. You'll find this out by reviewing the program and application details in the RFP document. Since it's a common issue that we're aware of, this should be spelled out clearly. And again, if it's not, ask in the Q&A. Then you'll want to calculate your incremental cost of your alternative fuel vehicles. If your total cost for an alternative fuel vehicle delivered is $150,000, you'll subtract the total cost of a comparable diesel or gasoline-powered vehicle delivered, and the result will be your incremental cost. So in this scenario, each unit purchased, even though it costs you $150,000, only counts for $50,000 in the total project budget. However, we still need you to give us the full cost, as well as the cost of the baseline or conventional or comparable vehicle, whatever language you're using, so we can verify the allowable project cost. So if we've done our job and set up the budget form correctly to calculate according to the specific opportunity that's open, your spreadsheet calculation should tally accurately. But if you're filling in the budget form for an open opportunity and it doesn't seem to make sense, please don't just edit the spreadsheet calculations. Instead, submit a question to Jeff and we'll double check our work. Then we'll respond with a correction to the RFP or with a walkthrough for you and for others who might also need the assist within the Q&A. Finally, is it a fleet and vehicle specification list or a budget document? Yes, it is. I mentioned a few minutes ago that EPA and Department of Energy have different budget and data capture documents. To keep it easier on ourselves, we do use the native data and budget forms for each type of project. Whereas the previous budget form captures only the equipment that is proposed for procurement under the grant, the EPA form also captures detailed information on the equipment being destroyed and replaced or improved by the procurements taking place. Especially for vehicle or equipment replacement projects, nearly all of the important project data for a DARA subaward is captured in the fleet data form. This is a completed fleet data sheet for a whole project application to EPA that we used one year. It contains projects from 3 proposed subawardees. One fleet has 4 different types of units, but only 8 total in the project. The other fleet has a single type of unit and 21 total units proposed. And the third subawardee is proposing 2 different truck stop electrification sites. So your DARA applications at MEC may have 1 or 2 columns max, depending on how homogeneous your proposed fleet upfits are. All right, time for a deep breath. Jeff, I'm about ready for lunch. Can you bring it home for us?
Thank you, Kelly. She just went over the RFPs and RFA components. So if you're selected as a sub-awardee of one of our grants, the following is a summary of what you're agreeing to when you turn in your proposal or application. This includes the agreement, reporting requirements, scope, budget, expense, and expenditure plans, and the performance period to work in. The administrative conditions section of the RFP will specify whether successful applicants will become a subrecipient or a beneficiary. Both types of subawardees have to comply with programmatic rules and regulations to get their reimbursement. But a subrecipient has an extra set of regulations to comply with during the project, some of which survive the end of the project period. And no, you can't simply decide to be a beneficiary. Typically, DERA project subawardees are considered beneficiaries, and DOE project subawardees are subrecipients. So beneficiaries have fewer flow downs than subrecipients. Next. On a professional service agreement, the main components are the agreement and exhibits, scope of services, time of performance, budget, compensation, compliance and with regulations, certifications, and flow downs. Included in the agreement are the scope of services the subawardee agrees to. And most, they include meetings, progress reports, special status reports, and most importantly, tasks and deliverables such as procurement activities, community outreach, data monitoring, and analysis. Also with the agreement, the budget for services will be spelled out. It includes the budget period the expenditures will cover. In this example, there are 3 budget years. The budget will be broken out like this to show federal and subawardee cost share during the budget period. Here are some typical reports that are needed for the agreement. With project impacts and reporting, all funding is conditioned upon accurate information provided within the proposal and will require accountability and reporting by the successful subawardee. With pre-construction and construction phase reporting, subawardees will submit on a monthly basis a written progress report of construction activities under the grant. And lastly, annual reporting for station service requires reports that will be submitted to MEC in draft form no later than the end of each quarterly period following the beginning of station service and sales, or as otherwise specified in the agreement. And this is to include a summary of quantifiable metrics and project summary narrative. You'll be signing a certification stating that there are no lobbying, debarment, or suspension issues with any governmental agencies, plus that you have a drug-free workplace procedure in place. And you'll also be signing an assurance of compliance with non-discrimination federally assisted programs. There will be programmatic terms and conditions, and they govern eligible actions and procurements, and generally they won't survive beyond the project period. With administrative terms and conditions, they govern eligible actions and procurements and imposes funder requirements. They are likely to include audit and financial obligations and likely to include post-award obligations. This is a sample of what is covered in a typical terms and conditions. It includes regulations incorporated by reference. It also includes numerous terms besides the 6 listed below, which are also include terms for allowable costs, reporting requirements, and auditing, to name a few. Lastly, all successful subawardees shall comply with applicable federal, state, and local laws and regulations in the performance of all work under resulting agreement. Subawardees shall obtain all federal, state, and local permits, authorizations, and approvals of all work performed under the agreement. This includes the governing grant agreement between MEC and the federal agency. And remember, beneficiary and subrecipients have different obligations. So audit and other post-award obligations will only apply to subrecipients, often as specified in the flow downs. So that ends that part. And now that you're all excited about federal flow downs, we're done with the informational portion of the meeting. We have added supplemental and more detailed plot of the various funding opportunities below, which you can review at your leisure after this event. We'll send the slides and post the link of the recorded webinar on the website. Now we'll unmute everyone's mics for questions that you may have regarding the information we just went over.
Thanks, Jeff. And I'm going to suggest that people, we should have said this earlier, post questions to chat. These questions are, we are obviously recording the meeting, but we're not necessarily intending to record these questions in any official kind of communication location. So I think feel free to speak up. I will say that I do like a nice training meeting that ends with a couple of questions just to make sure somebody was paying attention. But it's also nice to take the win and say we covered everything. I am not seeing any questions in chat, and unless someone is speaking on mute, I hear no questions either.
All right. We'll give you another couple of seconds here, and if we don't get any questions, we hope you've learned a lot more about EPA and DOE programs, and will want to submit a proposal application that will help you save money while helping the environment. Again, we'll send out a link of the webinar that includes supplemental information regarding our current and upcoming funding opportunities. And again, I can't stress enough that you should contact our office if you have any questions or to find out if any of your plans or projects are compatible with any of our funding opportunities. And we'll work with you to come up with a plan or solution to help you save money. So one last opportunity, below there you can see the names of everybody that deals with the funding opportunities.
I'm going to take a moment because we have a few people still on the line to just review the supplemental slides since there are no questions. So this basically goes over the anticipated, these are still tentative, release dates and available information for the next opportunities. Again, as David mentioned up front, we have a project that should go on offer January 5th. So look for that after the new year. The funding and costing profile is 45-55, 45 local, 45% federal funding, 65% local funding. The total budget is between $400,000 and $2 million. So that'll be our project funding range for this opportunity. There's an overview of the types of projects and some information about how to be in touch with us there. Eligibility information, criteria for evaluation, etc. We also have a description of the Zero project. We hope to release this in February, you can see here we don't have quite a budget here yet. We are combining funding from several open projects that have had project partners drop. And so we have room for new beneficiaries in several different funding years. So this is the DARA, which is diesel emission reduction, so diesel vehicle replacement opportunity here. And David is our DARA expert on this. He'll be looking forward to hearing from you on your interest here. And some specifics about the DARA program and what would be required after award for those are in these supplemental slides. Okay. I just wanted to give you a preview of that again if you want to review those in detail. We didn't want to do any mind-numbing review of these things in detail, also particularly because some of them are still in design phase. So that is all there. That's all I wanted to say about the supplemental slides there. Jeff and David, if you want to close us up.
After that quick rundown, does anybody have any questions now that you might want us to run over?
Very quickly,
okay, I think that.
Some questions in chat.
Okay, I think.
Yes, we will be sending an email with the slide opportunities, and those who attended this session, I think, Jeff, we can add you to the notification list when new opportunities come out. So let's say yes to that as well.
Yeah, bear in mind, January 5th is not that far away, so this would probably be a good time to think about your objectives moving forward with new grant opportunities. But again, if that is it for today, we'll go ahead and close up the meeting. But thank you everyone for coming. Do please feel free to contact us, phone or email, with any questions that we didn't get to today or any questions that may come up with you.
Many thanks for attending, and we'll see you. Everyone have a great holiday. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.